Hi there, everyone. We're just going to give it a few more minutes for some attendees to finish trickling in. So we're going to look to get started around like 104, 105 here.
See a few more people coming in, which is great. So excited to have everybody here this afternoon.
And for those who've just joined, we're just going to give it a few more minutes to let attendees keep trickling in, about 3 more minutes here, and then we'll get started. Righty. Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and get started here, and then we'll have the recording afterwards for those who trickle in late and want to catch the beginning. So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining today. It's so great to have you all here. And today we're going to be talking about from insights to AI, how data activation powers copilots. So in terms of today's agenda, we'll go through introductions, and then we have a poll question for you all. We'll review the state of AI today, walk through how Data Foundation can support insights in AI, and then how that data activation powers AI. Then we have a very cool demo for you all, and we'll save some time at the end for some audience Q&A. So, starting with introductions. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan, and I'm the lead business intelligence analyst at Interloop, and I'll be playing host and moderator today. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jordan first to introduce himself.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Megan. I'm Jordan Berry, CEO and co-founder of Interloop. I'm like, super excited to be here with our guest Boris. So I'll pass it to Boris to say hello.
Hey, I'm Boris Sabas. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Census, and it's fun to do this. I'm excited.
Perfect. Well, I do know, thanks for teeing things up, Megan. Wanted to do a quick intro, kind of explain who we are and why we're all here. So I'm happy to start, and then we'll pass it to Boris at Census. But did want to just give a quick backdrop on who we are. Like I mentioned, co-founder of Interloop. We're a Microsoft partner really focused on Fabric and Copilot. Our mission is helping companies achieve more with their data, and that can take different forms or fashions based on your industry or your functional group. But really, our goal is to help make that process as seamless and as streamlined as possible. So everything from helping with setting your strategy, delivering technology, or just being that fractional data team that can help you in the long run. We're here for that full life cycle journey to help you go from idea to insight and then actually delivering value for the organization. So super excited to be here and talk through kind of how some of these technologies come together to create something pretty magical with Copilot.
All right. Well, I'm like I said, I'm the co-founder of Census. We're a data platform. We launched about 6 years ago. And we help companies of all shapes and sizes kind of put their data to work and take advantage of all the data that they already have in their organization. And that kind of runs the gamut of the kind of life cycle of data in order to kind of deliver data that you can trust and everywhere that it matters. So we can help you unify, deduplicate, enhance, activate the data anywhere you need it. And in particular, we love to work with companies like Interloop to kind of operationalize data, to bring it into the tools where it can have the most impact, whether those are SaaS products or Copilots. It doesn't matter for us. It's really all about kind of putting data on offense and actually having it be something you can use in your organization rather than just something that you look at when you're looking at charts.
And would like to say it's been a great partnership. So I know we've worked with Census, leveraged it to help many clients deliver their data in whichever way is most important to them. So super excited to have you here today, Boris, and we'll love to tap your expertise as we walk through some of these slides and talk about everything from data to AI and beyond. So awesome.
Great. So I'm going to pop back in here for our quick poll question. So we should see this coming through for you all to answer. And so really, we're just trying to get a gauge on how integrated is Copilot or ChatGPT in your workday today. You have, maybe you use it every day, you have it, but only sometimes use it. You have it, but you don't use it. You don't have Copilot yet, or you're just unsure what's Copilot. So feel free to submit your answers below, and we'll have the results here shortly.
I mean, I don't know about you, Jordan, but like I can't even reduce it down to one. I think I use multiple products like it daily. I'm now in the roulette wheel of like, am I using Copilot, Claude, or Gemini like today?
Absolutely. I'm curious to hear where the audience is on the spectrum, but it's there's
Yeah.
more and more tools every day, right? It's pretty fascinating.
Okay. Let's see if I can. Looks like we've got almost everyone answers. And let's see if I do this correctly and we share the results. Right. I think you should probably all still be able to see the results in the chat, hopefully. So it looks like we have a tie between people who use Copilot every day and have it and only sometimes using it. And then a couple of don't have it yet and what's Copilot. So kind of a broad spectrum of answers here.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good to hear that we've got kind of a broad spectrum. And I do think, anecdotally, we've seen that across the board too, as people are at different stages in their AI journey. So, yeah, I think this will be pretty relevant to everyone, depending on where you are. But with that, maybe we'd love to talk about how we got here with AI. So, for those that are using Copilot every day or those that are just starting to explore it, did want to take a little time capsule and go back in history. And especially as we get into the generative AI, Boris, would love to hear your kind of point of view and what you've seen. But really what I like to talk about in terms of AI is that it's not a new concept. I know it's getting a lot of fanfare. There's a lot of, press articles about, particularly generative AI, but AI has been a practice and a, framework for quite a while, even as early as early computing. So, simple computers really were in some ways, a version of AI. And how can you use computers to perform tasks that humans traditionally did? Obviously, that was a very early and burgeoning, practice and really studied in research institutions. As you got into the, late 80s, 90s, that's really when AI started to be used in practice. So probably have all heard the term machine learning, which really is a predictive engine, right? So using machines to not only tell you how things are, but how we think they might be or where they're going. And not so dissimilar from some of the regression models or things that you might have done in high school, but just kind of supersized and done in a much more scalable way. I think as we entered into the late 2000s, 2010s, that's when kind of AI really started to take form and shape. And actually, this was kind of the early days when Interloop got its start, was when IBM Watson and some of those tools were released, being able to win chess games and outmaneuver even humans at some of the things that we've done for generations. And you really started to see kind of the early bottom of the growth curve there, where we're starting to see some of these capabilities, but the computing power and some of the access to be able to deliver them has been challenging. And now more recently, as probably many of those that are joining us today, we're all focused around generative AI, which is, going beyond, math and now actually adding in art and language and creative elements to help clients really leverage this advanced capability in new and exciting ways. And I'm curious, Boris, have you lived through this and kind of experienced this shift as well?
Live through it is a strong term. I wasn't born in the 50s, but I definitely remember what AI was when I was in college, which is closer to the second box than the third box. um, and it was nothing like what they're doing today, right? So I think it was interesting to watch like this thing that everyone laughed about, which was like deep learning. That was this process that no one thought would work. And I think the first place we saw it in the mainstream, I don't know if anyone remembers this, was actually translation. Translation was that first signal where doing the statistical quote unquote dumb approach suddenly yielded better results, right? And it's been really interesting and almost like, I don't know if the right word is like awe-inspiring to see how like the scaling laws, as they say, have applied to this all these workloads where, just doing something so brain dead simple. And I encourage, if you're technically minded, there's actually there's years ago, there's a relatively easy Coursera class to teach you like the kind of the basics of how like an LLM and a machine learning model is built in today, like in the world today. It's actually not that complicated. It's mostly some math, right? And to realize that like if you just take that architecture and just pile the zeros on it, there's just like unbelievable things happen. And like, I mean, I'm a spectator as much as anyone really at some of these things. And if it makes anyone feel better, a friend of mine runs a foundation model lab and used to tell me about this stuff like 4 years ago, and I'd be like, yeah, right. And lo and behold, here we are now.
It's amazing how quickly some of these technologies can just take hold, right? So, um, and that's a great kind of segue too, because I think if we double click on generative AI and some of those LLMs, in the early stages they were pretty dumb, right? They weren't very good at doing certain things, maybe more like an infant or a kindergartner. And I think this group is all living through the high school years and now the college years and going into PhD as an AI. And so I think this is one of the things that we like to highlight too. And one of the principles that we talk about with AI is that, prototyping solutions is pretty easy. Moving them all the way into production and operationalizing them, that's where really it takes that leadership and the intentionality to deliver. And so if you look at just kind of the spectrum of generative AI, you've got everything on the far left, very simple generation. And this is probably, I go back to thinking about like tools like Grammarly, where, hey, I want it to spell correct for me or reformat a paragraph. And then some of the newer tools with ChatGPT, I want you to, summarize a PDF or generate an image. Obviously, that's gotten better and better over just particularly in the last couple of weeks. But, that simple input output was really where I think a lot of us get started and see the magic of generative AI. While that's super great from a personal standpoint, from a business standpoint, I think that's where we've got to go a little bit farther to start to really take advantage of some of these tools. And so if you go into the kind of the mid-range, we've got things now like retrieval, where, versus just giving me general Wikipedia type information or facts, I want you to actually be able to answer questions about my business. And so again, kind of think about, the intern on day one probably isn't going to be able to answer a lot, but once you, train them and give them access to your wiki, et cetera, that's when you can start to make, intentional and intelligent, assertions about that data. And then where I think a lot of the attention is happening today is really on the far right, the action or agentic is the wording that a lot of folks are using is, okay, great, I can get answers to my questions. Now I want to take action. I want you to go do something on my behalf. Maybe that's human triggered, maybe that's triggered by the environment, something going on. And so I know a lot of the pieces we'll be talking about today and some of the demo will be showing how you can go all the way from the left to the right. And I'm curious, Boris, since you guys are connected to so many systems and see so many use cases, what are you seeing in kind of the retrieval and the action side? Anything of interest that would be helpful for our audience?
I mean, I think what I see is, I think anyone, the probably the dominant way people use our software, even before generative AI was a thing, is giving context to uh, software or humans at their company, right? So data teams would connect Census and they would say, all right, I'm going to put this information into Salesforce, into HubSpot, into Dynamics, right? All these various tools. And that had two side effects, right? That was they were trying to go for. One is, hey, my salesperson can pull up the information without having to open up a BI tool. And two, I can now do all sorts of interesting automation in that tool, like a CRM, right? So I can generate an email alert based on these action, like this information about a customer, which you can't do from the BI side, right? Because that's a separate silo of data that is like view only for that user. And so Census has been feeding software like kind of context for a long, long time. And it does it in a way that's like very controlled, where you decide which part of the user you want to put into the CRM and where, et cetera. Um, and I think what I've seen as people kind of, they have this whole new um, piece of software, let's call it that. I mean, that's what it is. It's still a piece of software that also requires context. And so I think what I've seen the most common is that people want to feed the same kinds of context they were putting into a CRM, but now they want to put it into systems that are designed for doing generation. And so in other words, um, they are doing some of these retrieval workflows, but not necessarily like designing it in that way, but more like saying, hey, I have sources of data. I have things about our invoices, our customers, and they need that in a place where AI can leverage that semantically. And so they're putting that into tools like an Elasticsearch and all sorts of new kinds of destinations that were always available in Census, but are now becoming more and more common, right? I'd say like, and then you and I have kind of talked about this before today, right? But it's like, I think this is definitely still emerging as a pattern, because I think people still have a lot of work to do to try to get to data that they trust rather than just here, let me move some data around. But this to me is a great place where, again, data teams can now drive even more growth activities, right? That to me is like where they're seeing the value of doing this. So whether that's automated support, whether that's uh, uh, automated outbound email, all these things require customer context or internal company context. Otherwise, you're just going to send crappy generic stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, couldn't agree more, and love that word trust. I think that's a theme as we go throughout this is, the tooling is great, but if you can't trust that data, or how do you ensure you trust that data? I think a very, very astute point there as well. So, um, and kind of to that end, to getting to that point where you can trust your data and having that curated foundation that then the AI can work off of. That's what we often talk about as kind of the dirty secret of AI is everyone's all excited about the technology, the future potential. But as you go to implement it, there's often this reality of, whoa, if my data isn't organized and it isn't unified and it's not ready for AI, how can I expect it to deliver me the answers or those outcomes that I want it to? And so that's often kind of what we see as organizations sometimes have a bit of what we call like a false start, where they've gotten some AI tooling set up in their organization, but they don't quite have that executive level strategy in place on how they should go about it and secure it and those types of things. And so this is just a visual we like to bring up. This is really more speaking to data foundation. This is a process that we recommend for a lot of our clients. We've got some great resources on it if you're curious on kind of the particulars of it. But the idea is rather than doing point-to-point integrations across your various operational tools, is how do you create that single source of truth from an analytics standpoint for your organization? And so a little bit of the opposite of some of that movement of data. We're actually talking about how do you just extract the data, get it into one place, how do you organize and curate it, and then how do you want to consume it? That's kind of the other unlock is, historically, if you were going to do a BI project, you were almost creating your own data silo, like you mentioned, Boris, where you've created these models, you've done some read-only type activities to be able to view that data, but to action on it, that was a whole different effort and different team. And so really this kind of modern data platform, unified data approach, it has, several different names. In my opinion, the biggest unlock is that you can use that same data in different ways, whether it's a dashboard, whether it's a copilot, whether you want to do data activation or otherwise known as reverse ETL to push that data places. Again, a little bit opinionated, but this is what we often recommend as a first step is how do you get that data unified to support those downstream outcomes?
Yeah, no, I think this is the perfect picture you've drawn. And I mean, you can use all the metaphors you want, right? It's like, I'm sure almost any data analyst ever has had the feeling of like, I made a dashboard, but no one's going there, right? And I think this idea of you spend so much of your time on the left side of this refinery, and it's so much work. It is actually a lot of work to get all the data in one place, to organize it, to clean it. It's like so much work. But then you really have to do this curation and activation, consumption kind of work in order to, instead of just building pictures of the business, you're actually improving the operational kind of pace of the company with better automation, which is ultimately what most of us should be trying to do, so that data is not just a kind of backwards looking reporting function, which is useful for accounting and Wall Street, I guess, but like is not how you grow a business, right? And I think this is all about creating a feedback loop by which all the value of centralizing data is put into action.
Yeah, so I think what we want to talk about today is kind of two patterns in the consume bucket. So, we're all probably familiar with building dashboards using tools like, Power BI, et cetera. Kind of the two that we want to talk about today is what's often talked about as reverse ETL or otherwise known as data activation, kind of similar terms. And as we go to the next slide, we'd love to kind of hear your point of view on the nuances there, and maybe it's just team or how we talk about it. But then also the Copilot use case. So how can we not only push data to operational systems, but now actually power Copilots? And then kind of the really cool thing is then let's blend them and let's show how a Copilot can trigger a sync and some of those types of
Let's
things.
do it.
So they all work together harmoniously, which is really cool to see. And so I'd love, Boris, if you wouldn't mind taking the lead on
Yeah,
this one,
no,
just
for sure,
speaking
for sure, for
through
sure. So
illuminating audiences.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
kind of spoken around it, but I'll give the like super simple description. At the end of the day, our product is deceptively simple with lots and lots of complexity hidden under the cover, right? What Census allows you to do is this idea of activating data, right? Which is all a form of data movement and data pipelines, which is why people call it reverse ETL. And the idea is instead of bringing data to your kind of Microsoft Fabric or all of your kind of cloud data lake kind of infrastructure, it's all about putting it to use. It's about saying, how do I efficiently, both in speed, in cost, in user experience, make it possible for all of the people on the business side, people who live in a CRM, people who live in marketing automation tools, people who live in support tools, people who live in finance tools, people who live in product tools, right? All these people who are actually trying to grow the business in their own way, they all want access to the information, but they need it to do automation, right? So what Census allows you to do is this technique, right? Which is to connect to something like Fabric, to any really cloud data warehouse or data lake infrastructure that you own, that you have invested in, and give you a point and click experience for putting that into hundreds of other tools where people kind of take action and run the business. And what's nice about this is like you get all the governance benefits of having the centralization, but you get all the user experience and like kind of velocity, self-service benefits of like a product and experience where a UI where a marketing ops person can come in and say, hey, I want to be able to build an ads, like an advertising audience of users who bought these pants but not those pants, and that all lives in the data. So they just need to be able to kind of construct the audience, and then they can put it in Meta, they can put it in Google, they can put it in TikTok, like at the click of a button. In the same way, you might be someone on the support team and you want to customize like the priority of a support ticket based on some metrics about the customer. So that might be that they're a paying customer, that they're a large customer, that they are an educational kind of customer, depending on what matters to your business. You can put all that together as the data team and say, here's what we know about these organizations. And then someone can come in and say, okay, these are the dimensions, the kind of the facts I care about related to these users or these organizations. I can put it into Zendesk, and then I can create priorities in my support tool. So it's all about being able to access all the data that you have curated, that you have governed, to ensure that you're always pointing at that version of the data. And then what reverse ETL does is say, we will map that state into any downstream system and make sure it's perfectly in sync. The hard part here is doing this at large scale, doing it in a way that is easy to use and that it never breaks, right? So, gamma rays happen, but also like websites go down, data mismatches occur, right? Someone goes in Salesforce and deletes something, and so suddenly like data won't go synced. You really don't want to end up in a situation where your sales leader and your marketing leader shout at each other because for 2 months the marketing leads were not getting forwarded into the sales tool, and that happens all over the place. And as a data team, you have the truth, and you want a system that like is alertable, monitorable, and like is tied to the core data that you are always curating and improving. So that's reverse ETL. It says, how do I connect my data lake into any downstream system in such a way that the operators of those systems can use them, can do it themselves, and you as a data team have perfect control, perfect visibility. And of course, like we said earlier, SaaS is the obvious kind of bread and butter of reverse ETL. But if you can do this, if you can take context from the data lake and consistently deliver it into a piece of software on the other side, so this is really at the end of the day, kind of like a database synchronization with all the right underlying mapping technology, then you can plug into newer systems, like things that look like more like agentic AI solutions, where it's the same process underneath the covers, but now there's a different consumer of the data rather than a Salesforce or a HubSpot. It's now going to be a Copilot.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Boris. I think that's important to kind of see the full picture here because there's so many use cases and there's so many different ways to use it. And one thing I just want to highlight in kind of our partnership and the reason we've seen so much benefit in implementing this with customers is just the fact that there's the data movement piece, but there's all the other things, right? Like error catching and throttling and managing the APIs. And that's, a lot of the value that Census brings to the table is that, our data engineers or even our end customers can focus on their business and their unique use case without having to worry about those underlying systems and some of the peculiarities that we all know they all have, right? The API docs never tell the full story. So
I mean, just like just like you on your analytics team, like your analyst at Interloop and at the customer, you have to clean data. Data is never perfect, right? It's always like, oh, like there's some holes in the way the addresses were stored. Like no one wants to talk about that, but that's the real work to be done. And it's the same way with data pipelines. Like there's so many things that go wrong, and like a good chunk of what our product is designed to do is to hide that from you as much as possible.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think what we'll do today then is to kind of put this, into reality for folks to kind of see it because it is that underlying plumbing and data movement, data pipelines is let's kind of show the outcomes and how this comes to life. And I know we talked about this being a little bit of an emerging use case, but did want to highlight how data activation can actually empower Copilot. So love that word context that you used earlier is how can we give the Copilot context into your business? But then also moving to that agentic or those actions that we talked about, how can the Copilot actually trigger syncs or move data? And so we'll highlight a little bit of that as well. But if we just break it down into kind of problem solution, really the fact is that, there's data across these different systems. Users need answers at the end of the day, right? Whether that system lives in, that answer lives in one system, across systems, et cetera, they're trying to get answers so they can, do their job, run the business. And so we're going to show how with Fabric, Census, and Copilot, we can actually give some of those superpowers to those users. And so specifically for those that want to kind of see behind the covers and see kind of how this architecture works, did want to just kind of highlight some of these key elements. So like I talked about, we've got Fabric as kind of that enterprise data store, your really kind of single source of truth for analytics or aggregate type data. We've got a lot of resources on Fabric if you're curious about it or just getting started on your Fabric journey. We're then going to leverage Census in a couple different ways. And so I know we can kind of speak about this together, but one of the interesting use cases is instead of pushing to software systems, actually filling these vector stores with data that the Copilot can read. And I'll maybe just spend 10 seconds on vector store, because that might be a new concept for some folks. But kind of the idea there is, just like as humans, we love tables, rows and columns. This is kind of a three-dimensional way that AI can access that data. So it's a way to kind of see what's similar, what's different, how related things are. And that's really the raw material that these AI tools use to then answer questions or deliver back kind of what they're predicting as the answer. And I have to say, it's interesting to see and kind of interact with an AI like a human. And while underneath the covers, it's just making predictions on, what's the next letter, what's the next word, what's the right answer. And so it's just pretty interesting there as well. And so kind of the final component of this is we'll have the person, the human, the key element of this, start to ask some questions, get some answers, and then we'll actually use the Copilot to kind of trigger it back through and take some action as well. So and I'm just curious, Boris, I know we talked about this as an emerging use case, but I think it's a great showcase of the technology and how it works. And I don't know if any comments here as well, but.
I mean, I think it is the absolute coolest thing you can do with our product today. I think it is like in the university style, it's like most companies that I talk to should still be doing simpler things to get started than this, but also far be it from me to like stop them from doing the coolest thing. It's there's still so much that I see in the world where, hey, you for sure have a marketer who just wishes they had some of this information in their tools, or a salesperson who had access to this information. But I think the most sophisticated companies I talk to are absolutely using our software in this way. And there's a lot of, I'll say my first spicy thing. I think there's a lot of, whenever you have a hype cycle, you get a lot of fancy words for the same old thing. And people kind of throwing you, oh, there's like 32 new ways of doing stuff. And you got to go get a bunch of fancy specific engineers just for this. And in reality, what you're showing in this picture is like, there's a new name for what's going on here, but at the core of it is like just you need consistent data pipelines. And if you have that, then you can power these systems. And so I think it's a really good a reminder of like just having pipelines and data you can trust just goes such a long way, and that you can avoid falling to the trap of like, is this some kind of new, do I need a whole new stack, or can I use what I have, whether that's Fabric, whether that's like a tool like a reverse ETL tool like ours. Like if you have these things in your arsenal, you can just use them. And so yeah, I'm very excited for you to show this.
Cool. Well, with that, would love to show and tell a little bit. So I've got a demo that I will show just to avoid any sort of technical challenges. But we do have the actual tools underneath. So if we get questions, we can dig into this a little bit as well. It's about 3 minutes, so I'll walk through it. Before I press play, you'll see that this is actually a Fabric instance for those that aren't familiar, but this is kind of the interface of Fabric. So we'll start there. We'll then show the Copilot, and then we'll actually show how Census powers all this together. So I'll do a quick narrative over it, and then we'll go from there. And as I press play, what you'll see here is what's called the task flow view in Fabric. And so this is really just illuminating that refinery that Boris talked about. And so really kind of the two outcomes that we'll focus on today are what we call Smart Sync, reverse ETL, like we've been discussing, and the Copilot use case. And so if you look in Fabric, this is kind of a unique pattern that we call orbit. We've actually got different data for each. So we may want to sync some of the data in one capacity, and we may actually want to provide the Copilot with a different set of data to be able to answer its questions. So we've got things here like customer targets, customers, accounts, context. If you're familiar with CRM type entities, that's really what we're looking at here. And so kind of the main use case is that we've got these sales targets. So each rep is given a certain target for different product lines. And we want to actually ask the Copilot about those sales targets and even update them if we think that one of the sales reps needs to be adjusted. So what I'm showing here is Copilot Studio. We've actually connected it to both Fabric and Census underneath the cover. So we're just showing some of the point and click ways that you can create a custom Copilot. So no need to write code, no need to really dig into Python and those types of things. If you know your business, you can build a Copilot. And so here we're actually showing the Census interface, like Boris, like you mentioned, point and click. You can get all of these different key elements, whether it's mapping the fields or triggering a sync. And so I'll show in a moment how we're going to use that webhook to actually sync the data through the Copilot. So some pretty cool stuff. So let's actually go into the sales target planning Copilot that we pre-built. Got some sample queries here, but really what I want to do to start with is just see, for my salespeople, what are their sales targets. And so this is actually going to do a little bit of complex math. It's going to pull back their targets. It's going to summarize them. And as you can tell, I didn't write SQL there, right? I just simply asked the Copilot what I wanted. It was then able to go into Fabric and see some of that data. And not only Fabric, but Census kind of supporting the AI search. And so here, if I go into Salesforce, I can see I've got those exact same targets, by account, and that rolls up at the rep level as well. But let's say I want to go a little bit farther and I actually want to update some of those targets. I don't have to go into Salesforce. I don't have to have a license and make all those updates there. I can simply ask the Copilot. So I can say, hey, can you increase these by 5%? I want you to show me the table. And what's the percentage of that with the 2024 goals that we had? And so you'll see here, it just did a bunch of math, a bunch of different things. So I can see the sales target, I can see our actuals. So doing some pretty sophisticated, BI type work here without having to write a bunch of code. And then you'll see this is showing kind of the last sync. And if I want to actually update those sales targets, I simply ask the Copilot that new to trigger Census, and then it goes and actually updates them within Salesforce. If I go back, you can kind of see that we updated 5 records there. It took less than a minute, and that all happened programmatically underneath the covers, with Copilot and Census. So I'll kind of pause there. I know that was a lot quite quickly, but pretty compelling use case, and happy to dig in a little bit deeper. But it's pretty amazing to see how all these tools play together just using natural language and those types of things underneath the covers. Cool. I'll pause there. Any initial thoughts, Boris, or it's interesting to see kind of the tools all come together.
I have so many questions I could ask you. Do you find that like the best way for people to use this is to just kind of throw a lot at it at first and learn where it's good and where it's not? Or do you start with very narrow use cases and kind of expand from there?
That's a great question. I think in our experience, what we've helped clients do is really start to hone in on how do you align your business strategy with then the efforts around the Copilots. Because we see a lot of clients just jumping in, trying everything, throwing spaghetti against the wall. But at the end of the day, if you don't align it to your business strategy, you're probably going to spend a bunch of engineering hours, a bunch of time trying to build something that doesn't really move the business forward. And so I think as long as things are in alignment, then you can go really niche. Because if hey, we're trying to accomplish X. To do that, we need these 4 things to occur. That's where you can get some really, focused engineering time to deliver those outcomes. But in terms of the tech, definitely finding the agents are better at doing one thing well versus trying to do 100 different things, across systems, et cetera.
Yeah. I also think like I still wonder, and this is more than I do here, and how like your clients feel, but there is an element of this of there's both. I feel like there's 2 things pulling at the company at the same time, right? One is everyone knows this is a dramatic shift in how you can grow grow your business, and so you have to align this to like actual growth goals and learn how this can dramatically change whether it's your bottom line or your top line. There's no question, but at the same time it's kind of like this new technology, this new species potentially that we all have to kind of get used to. And so uh, I tend to sometimes say something that is counterintuitive, but is like you kind of want to play and to allow for people to get used to this with something that's like lower stakes, which is weird because that's not a good way to get like large budgets and like big outcomes. But I do think it's like useful to have these internal workflows, for example, rather than like, okay, let's change our customer service experience completely to be agentic tomorrow morning, right? But actually get like the company, the various executives and individuals, like using it internally, learn, the edges of it and the trust and like where you can't trust it. And even though it might not have the same dollar impact, I think it actually moves your workforce towards this, which is necessary. Like we all have to play a little bit, and like finding things that are a little bit lower stakes, I find is actually kind of good.
Yeah, and I think that's a good move into the next slide is there are almost endless use cases to this, right? Like, and you can try so many different things and totally resonate with the fact that, where to get started is usually the first question, and how do you prioritize these things? And, yeah, do you go after that high stakes mission critical piece first, or do you focus more on, some things that are going to prove the value? And did you want to just kind of spark some ideas with the audience? And one of the good ways that we kind of think about this is, look to your different teams, right? Like find the things that are kind of mind-numbingly boring and hard that people are doing over and over again, that, if you could free them up to focus on, higher order things, that you're actually going to get more out of the team. And so we just wanted to highlight a couple things across these different, functional groups. But, like we talked about with customer success, if you can start to offload some of those really basic, question answer type requests, if you want to understand, what has a customer done with you, some of those types of things are some great use cases. I think marketing is really ripe for this, and actually just saw a study that in terms of generative AI, the marketing groups are the ones that have most adopted generative AI tools. As maybe 2 years ago, I'm not sure we would have expected that, but now seeing all the video and audio
Oh,
capabilities,
I
it's
think I
it's
disagree with you. I think
unbelievable.
I'm not surprised at all.
Oh,
Of
really?
the of these four boxes, okay, this is my first
Please.
place I'm gonna just jump against you. Of these four boxes, marketing is already the one that is most comfortable with imprecision, right? Like it you take more swings in marketing and they don't all have to hit. And it's okay to be like somewhat off on your targeting. Over time, you have to get better. So we see the more sophisticated companies have tremendously precise, for example, targeting in marketing, and you can't screw that up, right? We work with like Sonos, right? And they want to make sure they're not advertising to someone who's already bought that speaker, right? Like that's a ginormous waste of money if you're doing that. So you have to be very, very careful there on the granularity of your segments and that they're correct. But it's not weird to me that someone in finance would be like, do I really want to use the LLM to determine that something is like potentially fraudulent and deal with the effects of that being false, like dealing with false positives or false negatives more likely is the bigger problem. Versus marketing going like, do I really want to whip up like a LLM, like, generated artwork thing that like, it doesn't work out? Who cares, right? Like, that's just like, I'm just getting to do more. Um, so there, it's one of those where volume kind of solves for itself on the marketing side, but not necessarily true on the success and finance side or HR side. I think it's like I'm arguing at the edges here, but I do think like they are. I think as an organization, they are generally a good one to work with as a data team. They are eager for experimentation and they are more forgiving of mistakes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a
Good,
really
good source of
good
budget. Good
point.
source
And
of
yeah,
budget.
yep, and lots of money tends to flow through marketing to support the growth. So I agree. I think that's definitely an area to experiment. And I do think it's interesting too, to your point earlier, is okay. I think every department probably has like 10% that they could experiment without causing any sort of challenge for the org, right? And so I think that that's probably the hard thing for us as kind of AI leaders or business builders, is how do you identify those things that are very automatable, but also fuzzy and challenging, and has required humans in the past, and now we can start to unlock this capability around surfacing insights, taking action, even things that like customer feedback and that type. What type of sentiment can you pull out of those? How can you act on it? Um, and the other thing to me is just the cadence has picked up too, right? Now with AI taking up the load, you can get more answers more fast, excuse me, more quickly, so that you can then make faster decisions. And so it's just interesting to see kind of how even smaller teams are moving with agility that would have been unthinkable, a couple years ago. So some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. And we use this internally ourselves, right? So one place, for example, where we decided to do like half of it, but not fully automated, is I guess where marketing and sales intersect. So we we send, our sales team sometimes sends emails, like cold emails to potential prospects. And what we do is we've used AI to personalize the content based on what they've engaged with on our various like websites, who they are as a company, right? All that stuff we kind of combine. So you could fully automate that, right? In fact, there's probably half a dozen startups today that sell you like fully automated, like we'll just we'll just monitor your website and cold email people who visit your website, right? But that thing is also liable to go, um, hey, I saw on LinkedIn that your father died. My father died too. And it's like, that's just an LLM just, doing its thing. And so what we've done is like we've gone right up to the edge, but not the full way. So what we have is we bake in all the knowledge, we compress, like we present that to the sales team every day automatically in their CRM as like, here's interesting prospects, here's what we know about them, here's basically an email basically crafted, but you kind of take it across the line, right? Obviously that if you're trying to send millions of emails, that's not going to scale. But at our scale, it's actually a much nicer way to get a huge chunk of the value, but still protect yourself from the like, I don't want to send really bad emails.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and it is that human plus AI equals success and outcome, and so those that are kind of wondering, is AI going to just take over completely? Our point of view is probably not, right? There definitely still needs to be that oversight, that guidance, that strategy. They haven't figured that out yet. We'll see where it goes, but who knows? So. Very cool. And so I do think at this point we've sparked some ideas around AI. We've shown you how it works in practice. We've talked about the technology, the underpinning technology that enables this. And so we'd really just like to open it up to the audience to see, are there any questions about kind of you or your use case? But this is, obviously what we live and breathe, both from kind of guiding and delivering with technology, and Boris, your team, delivering some of the underpinnings that really make this all possible. And so I imagine we've got some questions from the audience on, just our point of view, and happy to answer those.
Yes, we do have some questions. First off, a question is, can you create automated daily reports or extracts, or do you have to ask it the same question every day? I'm assuming this is using a copilot or an agent. Do you have to ask it to every day to send the same report, or can you automate that task?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm happy to speak from kind of the co-pilot side in particular. Is what we showed today was kind of that human in the loop question answer to trigger certain things. The other capability is what they call triggers. So you can set it up where, hey, every night at midnight, go run some set of actions, or based on some environment variables, go run certain things. So, for instance, I can imagine certain things happen in your CRM. A big lead comes in or a big opportunity from a sales rep. You might want to trigger some alerts, or you might want to summarize all of the sales call notes and provide that to a key support team. So some of those kind of unique use cases where you've got to summarize data, put it in an email, send it out. All those are possible with agentic AI, using tools like Copilot. So I do think it goes well beyond kind of the question answer flow to now all of those kind of edge cases, human language type challenges that we've had in the past. You can actually automate those as well. And particularly around reporting, now pull in a tool like Fabric that gives you the underlying aggregation engine and tooling, things like that. It's a really interesting use case to see when all these things come together. So
Great. Okay, another audience question we have is, how much of this can be done with Microsoft Copilot out of the box versus what do you need additional tooling for?
yeah, another great question. I'm happy to tee this one off, and then Boris maybe can speak
I
to
think
it
you
as
you you
well.
you, you might know this better than me.
Yeah, the Copilot side. Yeah, and I think that is one of the thing that is kind of ever changing, I would say, and so that's where I imagine it can be very difficult as an IT team or a group kind of supporting the end users. Is even as these new models are coming out, every 3 months or so, it seems the underlying model has more and more capabilities, and so where I think it for every business is going to cross that chasm is your own data, right? So as soon as you're wanting to ask it questions of your own data or act on it, that's where you've really got to now curate the Copilot and give it some superpowers, I'll call it. And then especially as you go into the action realm, that's where some configuration is needed because you don't want to your point earlier, Boris, you don't want the AI just sending an email blanket without some sort of approval process or human in the loop. And so those types of action type use cases are really important. What we did highlight too is the fact that you don't have to write code to do all this. I think just 6 months ago, you needed engineers to actually deliver on some of these use cases. But now with some of the low code tooling, you can put that power in the hands of kind of citizen developers, business people, which I think is the big unlock because those are the people that know the business. They know, the format of the email that should go out. They know what works, what doesn't work. If you can kind of empower them to be a key input in this process, that's where some magic happens. And I would say, Boris, from your point of view too, we showed it there where, okay, I want to actually update that data in Salesforce. Using a tool like Census, that can actually be the workhorse that makes that all possible underneath the covers.
Yeah, I think the goal is always to support any source, any destination, right? Any source of data, any tool where you want data to be served as context, right? And we try to do that in such a way that you don't need data engineering skills or you just need to be able to say where is it coming from, where's it going, and then what are the things you want, what are the pieces of data you want. Um, and I might be a little bit biased in that I think it is very difficult to stay all in one singular perfect ecosystem, and there's always some demand for the data somewhere else. Then I think agents are going to be no different, where I think you can hope that, and again, I'm not an expert, like I'm not the biggest expert on Microsoft Copilot, but like obviously it has out of the box capabilities to read data, but I think it will always accept more, and it is always likely that you will have other data sitting around in places that needs to be fed into it. And if you do that one off, it's not going to be good. And if you want to do it properly, you're going to have to hire data engineers. So having some kind of tooling that allows you to do that. And then if tomorrow it's like, well, it's not Microsoft Copilot, it's a different Copilot that you want to use because the models are changing so fast, you don't want to have to rebuild the architecture, right? And so I think that's where, and I'm obviously speaking my own book here, but like I think that's where tools like ours shine.
Great. That's a great segue into this next question, which is all of this sounds so great, but we have a really small team that's at capacity. Do your companies offer services to help support these data engineering efforts?
I think it's a layup for you, Jordan.
I was gonna say, I think that's really where we shine, and we recognize that exact challenge of, hey, organizations that maybe had a small BI practice or a small engineering team are now getting asked to do all kinds of things, right? Build the dashboard, create the report, train the Copilot, push the data, and it's overwhelming, right? Because you won't have those skills, and so that is where Interloop we tout ourselves as kind of the fractional data team. And what we're different is you get to tap our different technologies and talent. So that tech and talent combo is quite unique. So from a talent standpoint, we've got data engineering, data analysis, data visualization, data science. And then from a technology standpoint, we're bringing a suite of powerful tools, Fabric being kind of the core of that ecosystem. But then that's where, tools like Census and our other partners really kind of fill all the gaps to help you deliver. So yeah, so for that particular question, happy to chat afterwards and see if there's any way that we could assist.
Okay, I think we have one final question. I think we're going to be right at time here, so this is going to work out perfectly. And so this question is, what do you recommend as the first step for someone who's interested in some of these AI applications, but only has just gotten data into Fabric or another unified platform? What steps do we need to do to be ready for data activation stage?
Yeah.
You want to go first, Jordan?
I can go from kind of the data side, but I'd be curious your point of view on activating the data and some of those types of things.
I think it's a great question, and I think people like I said, I think I said something similar earlier, that like there's always this desire to bite off a big thing or paint a big picture, and like we're building out this great architecture. And I think it is a great architecture, and I think you can stand by it, you internally at your company, or working with folks like Interloop, where this is an like this this kind of modern fabric architecture is really great and will last a really long time, and allows the data team to serve a lot of different functions in the company. So what I would say is, you actually want to find, this is my take, the narrowest use case. You find one stakeholder somewhere that is like engaged and wants, to access the data you have in one of these applications, or is willing to play, or has a active need right now that is sufficiently narrow that you can turn that into like the project. And sometimes it can be more you driving it. It'd be like, you have this idea, but you just got to find that first stakeholder, and it can be something so small. um Earlier I mentioned that example, and it's like, this is before AI was hot, but it still holds. This is one of our customers that uses our software all over the place to power all sorts of things. But their very first use case was like, they had a VIP field in their data. That's it. Just like, it's a Boolean. It was like a yes, no, right? And they had like 10 million users, and they had a yes, no field for, are they VIP? And that was sitting in their data warehouse, and they couldn't use it in their support tool. And they were like, the support tool needs to know so that we can create like two queues. It was something so mundane, right? So small. But again, you can do that with AI too. You can say like, here's we have a bunch of users in our database, and they have job titles. And there might be someone who's been trying to specialize an email campaign based on whether the job title is senior, junior, or executive. That is so easy to do with a little bit of AI in the mix from your core data. And then you can kind of serve that up, right? And like, the reason I say these like very trivial scenarios is like, it induces more demand. And then you have more buy-in to do more exploratory things and to bigger and bigger projects. Um, but otherwise, I'd say like, for the AI Copilot type thing, I think I would look for someone who's willing to play, who's willing to deal with mistakes, who's willing to kind of change their internal workflow, and wants to work with you on it. That's kind of, those are my answers. I'd start narrow and find one stakeholder that will make all the other ones jealous.
No, I love it, and I agree. So I don't have much to add other than just focusing on either the customer or the employee, the outcome. Find that use case first, and then reverse engineer it. I think that's a really good way to go about it for us.
Okay, I'll add one more piece that is more on your side of the equation. I think when people say, "Oh, I got my data into Fabric, and like, how do I get to this place?" You should hire Interloop, and you should work with Interloop, and you should use their software. But I think there's this feeling of like, oh my, if I'm going to put my data into action, data activation is like, it makes your data really live, right? It goes from being a picture, and if the picture is wrong, oh well, to, oh no, this is going to power a salesperson sending an email. It's going to power an HR team screening a resume. It's going to power something real, something operational. So the stakes are higher. So the thing I would say is, people get scared, and they delay and they delay until their data is perfect. They get obsessed with this idea of like, I got to make my data perfect. And I think this is a mistake. You want to just accept a certain amount of error and create some workflow where the data is live and someone is using it, and they will help you find the mistakes. The data is never right. It is always in a perpetual state of motion. And so just pick a narrow like data type. Let's do something around employee data or customer data. Just one, maybe just organizations, not even users, or maybe just users. Like, you narrow it as much as you can so that you don't obsess about getting it to be perfect, like a perfect graph of all the data being perfectly normalized. And we know exactly how like these organizations are made of these users, and there's no mistakes. There will be mistakes. The beauty of this architecture is that as you fix those mistakes, everything just gets fixed automatically. That's the beauty of this architecture, right? So that's my final piece of advice. Be comfortable with bad data, deploy it, learn.
All right, well said. Well said. Well, with that, I
Well,
want to
yep,
just
sorry.
wrap it, or
All of
Megan,
our
if you'd
questions.
like to, but is that end the question? And
That
if
was
there
it.
were any more, happy to answer those offline and
I
get back
think
to folks. But and in that end, just, you know, one of the things that we pride ourselves on too is providing value before we ask anything of our clients too. So, you know, if you are thinking about some of those use cases or want, you know, a common voice or a backdrop to have those conversations, you know, as an attendee, happy to offer you a strategy session so we can talk through some of those use cases, refine them, document them so that you can bring them back into the organization. But really the goal is to just to help you, you know, move a step or two forward in your journey. But I did want to thank Boris, thank the Census team. Appreciate everybody coming here to make this possible. I thought it was a great conversation. Hopefully we'll have many more in the future, and appreciate everybody for attending today. But with that, we can conclude, and thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, everyone.